This is a talk about React Native on tvOS. I'm just going to start with a quick show of hands. Before you saw the title of the talk, how many of you knew that you could do React Native on tvOS? OK, a good smattering. Fair enough. Second, just so I know sort of where to pitch things, how many of you would describe yourself as more of like a JavaScript or web developer, more React Native web developer? Nope. OK, how many of you would describe yourselves as like native, OK, cool. Good show of hands. So the vague plan for today, I'm going to say hi. Cool, easy. We're going to do lots of live coding. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to build this grid view in React Native on TV, all in React Native. Then we're going to wrap that grid view in a native tvOS TabBar. So that's sort of hitting the brink of like sort of native tvOS stuff and React Native JavaScript stuff. Then we're going to add a kind of fully native search bar. So we're going to write some ObjC. It's going to be super fun. Yeah, and then I'll say bye. So quick hi. My name is Neil Kimmett. That's my Twitter handle. I'll tweet out links to the slides afterwards. I was going to put them up before, but I didn't. I'll also put them on my website. I've been a mobile developer since about 2011. Here's some apps I've worked on. I made a recipe app for M&S. I made an app to sell you razors for a company called Harry's. Right now, I work at this place, Tab, in the bottom right corner. They're an agency based up in King's Cross. Tab stands for the app business, a business that makes apps. What we're going to talk about today is the work I did last year for a couple of months at a company called Boiler Room in the bottom left corner there, and specifically the work bringing it to TV. Whoa, look at that keynote animation. It's wild. So what is Boiler Room? So Boiler Room is this sort of underground music company. They put on live music events, and then they film them like this. She's playing some Whitney Houston right now. It's great. And then they live stream them for all of their followers online. And then they also put them up on their website, and you can go and watch them afterwards. They have like 5,000 or so different shows. So I joined Boiler Room, and there was a mobile app, which is written in React Native, which is on the top. There's like a featured tab, a search tab. You can watch things and search for things. And then there was an existing TV app. So I don't want to take entire credit for the TV app. It's written by Maxime and Sean, who are sat back there. Say hi, guys. There we are. Yeah, those guys. But what I was building was this search thing in the bottom corner. And hopefully you can see at the back, but it's got that native search keyboard thing, which is the thing it's basically what we're going to be building towards as we go through the talk today. So let's get into it. How does React Native on tvOS work? It's mostly the same as iOS. tvOS, the platform, is basically the same as iOS. You use the same underlying framework, UI kit to build classes. You have UI views. You have UI view controllers. It's the same underlying thing. There's just subtle differences, such as the fact that you obviously, your input is with a remote. It's not with touch. You do have, the remote is this little thing with a little sort of touch area at the top. So it's kind of touch-y, but it's a sort of different way of interacting with things rather than just hammering them with your fingers. And it's definitely a little rough around the edges. It was implemented, I think, all by this one guy whose name I should have put in my notes, but I didn't, at Salesforce. He gave a really good talk at Chain React? Chain React. What? Doug Lauder. Yes, that guy, Doug Lauder. He gave a really great talk at Chain React about the process of making React Native tvOS stuff. But yeah, so you're going to need to do little bits of diving into native code, so you kind of need to be familiar with that. So all that said, we're not going to dive into some native code yet. We're just going to write some React code. We're going to build this grid view. It's going to look like this. We're going to have our sort of app component. Inside that, there's going to be a flat list component. And inside that, there's going to be a grid of cards. And it's going to come out looking like this, in theory. the data that I've used here is from this open source thing that guy called iOS developer Chris Eidhoff made, Pomo.tv, where it's just a bunch of really good conference talks. And it's all open source, so I just stole the data and made a little TV app of it. So with that said, let's get into some code. Hopefully, I've got everything set up nice and dandy. Nope, you're on the wrong screen. Right. So I've already done some things. We're going to need to make this a lot bigger. Go away. Can you guys see that at the back? Is that a bit too big? About that? All right, cool. So we have our app component. Inside our app component, we have our video grid component. Inside that, we have this flat list that I was talking about. I'm just going to get my notes up so I don't forget all the different things that I need to do. Cool. Inside that, it gets its data from this function here. I've sort of already put in some stuff around search. This component right now, I'm getting a real bad glare of that, but it'll be fine. Basically, this just returns this videos.json for now. And in theory, later, we're going to filter it with our search term. We use the items YouTube thing for the key extractor. The render item just renders this card component that we have. And so just like when you're doing stuff in regular React Native, if you want something to be kind of selectable, you use this touchable highlight. So you wrap things in touchable highlights. And that means on tvOS, you have this thing called the focus engine. For sort of, it knows which views you can sort of move to and which ones you can't. Inside that, we have a YouTube image, which is going to be that background image. I'll show you in a sec. And we've got a couple of bits of text, title, some speakers. Hopefully, nothing too scary in here. Our YouTube image just wraps image background and gets an image, and then we've got some styling stuff here, which isn't the most exciting. But the first thing to note about React Native tvOS, you can't launch it from the command line. You need to launch it using Xcode. Where is my mouse? There's my mouse. So we're going to need to get our hands dirty with Xcode. Oh, God, that's overscan. So every React Native app that you make now, so you also can't use, is it create React app? You need to eject your app. But every React Native app you make nowadays will come with what's a tvOS target, which means you need to switch to the tvOS scheme. So you see up here in the top left, up there, this thing here. Hopefully you can see at the back. We need to, it will start on that. We need to pick the tvOS one. And one thing you're going to come across a lot is if you use any third-party libraries, a lot of them won't come with a tvOS target. You'll need to fork the library, add it yourself, and sort of point to that fork. Anyway, they're just some possible hiccups you might hit. But we hit Command R to run, and of course our simulator is on the wrong thing. And oh God. So I was toying with the code just before going on, and it's not worked. It's on this screen here. I'm going to try and fix it before I put it. What videos equals? What? This dot videos? Yeah. Oh, God damn it. Oh, no. I hope I haven't fallen the first hurdle here. Right, so we're going to fix this together. We're all friends here. Can't find variable videos. On what line? 47. What are you talking about? 47. Oh, that should be all video, shouldn't it? Don't toy with your slides just before going live. Hopefully now you'll work. Hooray! Cool. So to use the tvOS simulator, we use this handy fake remote here. And you have to sort of hold Option and play around on this weird touchpad. But you can kind of see it's pretty tricky to see which sort of item we've got selected in our grid here. For the e-guide in the front, you can see as I sort of move that, it moves the little thing in 3D, but it's not great. So we're going to fix that. So we're going to fix that by making our card component sort of track whether it is the sort of current focused item or not, and then render itself slightly differently. So first we're going to add some initial state for that. So we're going to add a constructor. Cards are going to start off by default not focused. Then there are some handy little callbacks in props in our touchable highlight for when an item sort of gets selected and when it gets decent. Not when it gets selected as in sort of like clicked on, but when it gets like highlighted, which are on press in and on press out. So we're just gonna assign them here, and then in here we are going to update the state to be focused true when it's been sort of highlighted and focused false when it's not. And then obviously we're going to want to actually make the card look different when it's selected or not. I'm going to use this handy snippet I prepared earlier, so we're going to keep our same regular card styles. Oh, come on, snippet. Come on, snippet. Typing whilst it's over there is really weird. God, come on. It's definitely there. Ray, there we are. So the opacity when it's focused, we're going to have that at 100%. Otherwise, we'll have it 50%. And we're also going to apply this transform to just put a slight little scale on the things. And hopefully, that will make it much easier to see. Didn't save it, did I? That would help. Oh, come on. Can't find very. Aha, of course. I'm not used to all this JavaScript where we've got to sort of pull out our. So it's the error was variable focus not found because I didn't do that. Whatever you call this thing, destructuring. Is that right? Now, cool. Where's our remote? There it is. So hopefully, come on. Option, not control. You can kind of see it's a lot more obvious now which one is selected. It's this one, which is a much better user experience, especially for when you're sat, far back from your TV playing with a remote. Right, so let's jump back to our slides. Cool. It's kind of what we built. Well, it's all kind of rebuilt. We have this. We're going to keep coming back to this diagram as we sort of build more and more components. We have our app, our flat list, and our cards. Now, let's drink some water. Let's talk a little bit about tvOS and the sort of native navigation stuff we have inside that. Well, and in iOS as well. So there's kind of three main things to be aware of. The biggest one to be aware of is UI View Controller. UI View Controller in iOS and tvOS is sort of the workhorse of the framework. It's a bit like Component in React. It normally represents a screen full of content. It has a UI view in it, which does the sort of rendering, but it is the controller, so it sort of does the business logic to do with that sort of screen. And view controllers can contain other view controllers. Classic example of that is a UI navigation controller, which is that sort of stack that you normally get in an iOS app where, you tap on a detailed thing and it slides over and you have the back button in the top left. But what we're going to talk about today is UI TabBar controller, which is that one that you have all the tabs on the bottom. You tap on one and it switches out the content for that tab. So this is what it looks like on iOS, and this is what it looks like on tvOS. So instead, the tab's sort of at the top, and then the tab bar, when you go into the content, the tab bar hides itself so that you sort of just focus on the content in the TV. So a UI tab bar controller owns a list of UI view controllers, one for each of those tabs. And then each of those view controllers has this sort of model object called a UI tab bar item, which it uses to like describe the title and the icon and other stuff about the tab that it's in. So if we want to use UI tab bar controller in our React Native app, we kind of need to use well, I thought at first we needed to use like one of these native navigation libraries. So we can't use React Navigation, which is the sort of the default JavaScript re-implementation of navigation in React Native apps, because they haven't done the JavaScript re-implementation of tvOS tab bars and tvOS search bars and all of this tvOS stuff. So we need to use something that wraps the native class itself, UI tab bar, rather than re-implementing everything in JavaScript. So there's Airbnb's one, native navigation, which they use in their app. But at the time I was doing this work, didn't have any documentation. It was in beta. It's written in Swift, which makes it slightly harder to interact with React Native. I played with quite a while this one from a company called Wix, React Native Navigation, which is a complete native navigation solution. Unfortunately, at the time, V1 of the library was kind of feature complete, but deprecated because they'd found a bunch of sort of weird edge cases and things things where it doesn't quite work. And V2 was sort of half implemented and didn't have a bunch of the stuff that I needed. But then I realized that there's built into React TabBar iOS, which I think is from back in the day when React Native sort of did more of a thin wrapping of iOS stuff. And it turns out you can use this on tvOS, and it uses the like top tab bars, which is super useful for us. So how do we do that? It's super easy. We make a TabBar iOS component. We make a TabBar iOS.item for each tab that we want. And we put our content into that. So we're going to jump back into some code, but I'm just going to describe what we're going to do first. So this is where we're at right now with our app. And we're going to take that flat list and card, wrap it in a tab bar, and then wrap that in a tab bar item. Let's get back into it. Right. So we're going to need to sort of change the, no, my mouse is not, where's my mouse? Come on. There we are. Right. So we're going to need to kind of change the top level stuff up here. So right now our app just has this video grid. We want this navigation component, which I handily prepared earlier. So this is like what I had on the slides. We have our TabBar iOS. We have our item. I changed the name of that just before. That's a video grid. And this is our search component, which we're going to fill in kind of later. But for now, we're just going to put some text in it. Hello. Can't even spell hello. Live coding is hard, yeah. I know I'm going to hit some errors because I haven't imported this guy, have I? Now that I've gotten all smug, it's still not going to work. All right. And we're going to want to change our sort of root component to be this navigation thing like this. Switch back to our simulator. Hooray! We've got some tab bars. That's cool. We don't have any content, which is, less cool. Don't worry, I expected that one. So we also want to tell React Native which tab bar should be selected at any one time. So we could just put selected equals true in here. And that would work, but we're not going to do that because that's cheating, and then we won't be able to change tabs. So sort of again, we're going to have some state for our navigation component. Oh, no, not that one. That one. So our navigation component is going to have this bit of state for selected tab. We can give them little names, home. Then that makes this selected thing here is going to be like this dot state dot selected tab. Oh, wow, look at that. Sweet. Is home. And then we can kind of copy that for our search tab. Comme ça. What's that complaining about? Oh, I need to close that curly brace, don't I? So that's all well and good. Unfortunately, we never, right now, we don't change our tab, change our state. So we need to do that. We need to, when these tab bar items, they have an on press, not an on press in like the touchable highlight. On press, which we're going to use to update that state. I'm going to write a little helper function here. Is on press. It's going to take a tab. That's then going to return another function that sets the state to the tab that we call. So when we call this on press, that gives us a function. So we're going to call, we're going to, in here, we're going to do on press is going to be this dot on press with home. And then we want to do the same thing for our search. So when that gets called, it'll update the state to be search. And when that gets called, it'll update it to be home. So now we should be able to, we have our tab and we have our content of our tabs. And then, cool, I don't know what that white bar is about. Then we have our search tab, which we probably have some text right in the top left, but you can't see it. But that's cool. We're going to replace that with a native component anyway. But look at that. We've got functioning tabs, and they feel all native, which is kind of the key thing for when you're building a TV app. Basically, all TV apps on tvOS, at least, function the same. You normally have this like grid of featured things like Netflix, what's new. Then you have a search tab. And we want things to feel native so that people are used to how the remote works and all that. Anyway, so here's what we have built so far. We have our grid of stuff in our flat list. That's wrapped in a tab bar item. That's wrapped in a tab bar. That's our app. Then we're going to add our native search component here. Right now, it's just that text. That contrast isn't that great. The idea is this search is striped, and anything that's striped means it's going to be native, and everything that's a block means it's something that we're like making in JavaScript. So now we're going to talk for a little while about how we're going to make that native search component, which means, woo, Objective-C. No one seemed that excited. So I realize some of you might not have done Objective-C before. So just going to do a quick little crash course in some of the syntax, because some people find it scary. But once you get to know it, it's really quite nice. Here's some JavaScript. We are making an object. We're making a cat called Mittens. And here's the Objective-C. First thing, we have to sort of declare the type of the variable up front, cat. Then we have a little star, which is a pointer, but let's ignore that for now. We have the name of the variable, and then we have this cat alloc in it. Alloc means we allocate the memory in it, means we initialize it. It's boring. There's some scary square brackets, but hopefully it makes sense. What if we want to give our cat a name, as we do? Here's how we do that in JavaScript. Here's how we do that in Objective-C. We kind of call our thing like init with name. That's the sort of convention in Objective-C. You have like init with something. And we have these weird ats before our strings, but that's for C compatibility reasons, which are quite boring. How do we make classes? We make them like this, with at interface, of course. So here we're making a class called cat. It inherits from a class called animal. If we want to make any properties or instance variables on that object, we do this with this at property syntax. We have this weird, ugly-looking NS string thing. The NS stands for next step, which was the company that Apple bought when they bought Steve Jobs back in the 80s. That's irrelevant. We have that little star again, but whatever. Property name is how you can read that. Then the next line, we are declaring an instance method. It's an initializer. So we have a little minus over there, which means it's an instance. If it's a plus, it's a class method or a static method, but we're not going to go into that today. We have this super scary instance type keyword, which just means this method, that's the return type of the method over there. That means we return the same sort of type that we're making, so you can kind of pretend that just says cat. Init with name is the sort of name of the function. And then we have the parameter, again, and a string, name. Then when we want to implement things in Objective-C, we do it in an at implementation block. Usually these live in two different files. We have the .h file, the header, and then we have the .m file, the implementation. Here we're declaring a function that returns nothing, returns void. And we're throwing ball, which is a thing of ball, to our friend, which is going to be a type person, and friend. And then sort of within the curly braces, we do our stuff. Which sort of leads me to what's great about Objective-C. I'm a native developer, so I need to get this in. In JavaScript, right, we're calling this function mittens throw ball friend. Am I throwing the ball to my friend, or am I throwing the friend to my ball? Like, I don't know. It's positional arguments. It's wild. In lovely Objective-C, you have mittens throw ball, ball, to friend, friend. All the parameters are named, and this sort of idea that people talk about is it's meant to read like a sentence. Sometimes it can be overly verbose, and you can have method names that are like this long. But it's not too scary once you get down to grips with it, so don't be too scared. What are we going to use this Objective-C for? Oh, and also other things like the rest of it, like JavaScript and Objective-C, they're both kind of based off C syntax, so like if-else looks the same. You've got dot syntax. You can figure a lot of it out. Right, so we want to make a native component. On the native side, there's kind of two things you need. You need a class that inherits from UIView. UIView is that thing that I was kind of talking about earlier, that UIView controllers control. And it does sort of rendering to the screen. And then we need this manager class, so like something manager, which is what does all of the boilerplate that exposes our custom component, which is going to live in that UIView subclass. And that's what exposes it to React. And then on the other side of the bridge, on the JavaScript side, we want to use a native component. We need to import our require native component function. And then we can assign it to a variable. The name we pass in there is the name of our component in Objective-C. I don't know what that null does because it's, I don't have a name parameter. Who knows? But then the important thing is we just use it just like any other component, sort of at the bottom there. So we're making some map, and we just use it in JSX like a regular component, which is super cool. So now we're going to build this. So we're going to get rid of that search component we had before. We're going to replace it with a very exciting native component. Right, which means we need to dive into some Objective-C and some Xcode. Right, so let's dive back into Xcode. So right now we don't really have much in our. It's really annoying that changing the font size doesn't change the stuff over here, so you probably can't see the sidebar at the back. I'm sorry. God, where's Finder? Oh, it's over here. Bear with me one moment. Just finding the files, ones that I prepared earlier. So first thing we're going to need. Actually, no. Let's show you how to make files in Xcode. That's what I was going to do. Actually, no, it's on the wrong screen. I'll just copy it across. Right. So the component we're going to make is a thing called. Oh wait, I haven't explained. So you know how I have our NS string in Objective-C, because they don't have namespaces. The sort of convention is all your classes start with like 2 or 3 letters as a sort of namespace. So our thing is going to be a search component. So it's going to be NK search component, because they're my initials. First thing we need to be wary of here, when I've just dragged these into the project, it's trying to add them to our, let's zoom in a bit more, our main target. We want to add them to our tvOS target and not to our main target. You probably could add them to your main target. It would probably still work the same, but we're working on TV, so let's do that. So we have our NK search component. Let's get rid of that. This is our thing which inherits from UI view. Top tip, you can like hold Option and click on things in Xcode, and it'll give you a nice bit of documentation. And then if we look at the .m file this is paired with, we don't have anything in there right now. That's cool. So for now, this component is not going to do much. We are basically just going to set its background color to red. It's going to be very exciting. So layout subviews is just this like callback that happens in iOS every time the view lays out its subviews as it's sort of drawing the tree of views. Every time that gets called, we're just going to. Is that text size all right for people in the back? Cool. Good. I'm going to do self.background color equals UI color. You get all these really cool prefixes. UI color dot red color. Now we need our manager component to expose that to React. That is all boilerplate, so I'm just going to copy that across from this one I made earlier. Cool, it's being added to the right target. Right, so this is our thing. It needs to inherit from RCT, which stands for React View Manager. So it's going to manage a view. And if we look at the implementation, there's this export module thing. It's a macro, which is why you need to do Objective-C rather than Swift, because Swift doesn't have macros yet. And you just need to implement this one method, UI view. So we're returning a UI view, and we just make an instance of our search component, and then we're going to be able to use that in our JavaScript. So let's try and do that. First things first, we're going to need to import that require native component function. We're going to put it in our tab, so let's put it here. Let's call it search. That's going to be require native component. What did I call it? NK search component? Yeah. And of course, our good friend null. And now we're going to replace that sort of placeholder text here with our search component. And in theory, so one thing, we're going to need to rebuild from Xcode. We can't do hot reloading because we've introduced a bunch of native code. So we need to rebuild every time we do that. So we're going to hit Command R to run our app. And we've still got our home tab. That's good. We're looking good. And, oh, we don't have our search tab. And I know exactly why. Don't worry, it's fine. That's because I'm going to teach you a little trick that you can use for debugging when you're doing stuff in Xcode. Look at that. We're learning as we go. In Xcode, lots of Xcode, there's like these weird panes that you sort of show and hide, and you need to sort of just get to know all these weird little icons. One of the super useful little icons is this little guy down here. This little sort of 3 rectangles. You click that, and it's kind of like the web inspector, but for native apps. So we can take a look at our app. It's not very exciting, obviously. You can see our tab bar at the top. We can see we've got our like UI TabBar controller over here, our native thing. And we can see we're getting our NK search component. So React is rendering our native search component in the right place in our tree. But if we look in this little panel over to the side here, you can see, hopefully, it doesn't have any height. It's got width, it's got no height. And that's because I have forgotten to give it like a, let's do a style. Is that flex equals 1 thing, basically. Styles dot, let's call it search. Then down at the bottom here, let's just, for now, do search flex 1. Now, we should just be able to hot reload. We can't hot reload because we're paused in the Xcode debugger. So we need to play before we can unpause. And then we can do this. We can go over to the side. Look at that, it's red. Woo! So that is our native component wrapped by React. Now we're going to need to make it do something actually useful. Is that the right place in there? Yeah, cool. Back to the slides. Cool. So this is where we're looking sort of right now. We have our fully React stuff over in our home tab. We have our TabBar item, which has our NK search component, which is native, wrapped in it. The next thing we're going to do, we're going to ignore some of this for now so we can get rid of. Whoa! I clearly had an automatic transition turned on there. That was exciting. We're going to create a React component to display our search results, because we kind of don't want to have to like go all in on native once we've made this native component. We want to put some sort of React children inside it. Then, as I'll explain later, we're going to display them in a search bar. I've kind of done that all at once. It's fine. So the next thing I'm going to introduce you to is a thing called UISearchController. Like how we had UI View Controller, UI TabBar Controller, there's UISearchController, which is what we're going to use to get that keyboard at the top to then display our search results underneath. And this is the native thing that we're kind of going to wrap. Here's what it looks like on an iOS. I don't know if you can see where it's that small. It gives you a search bar at the top. You're kind of responsible for rendering the results and fetching the results and doing all of the business logic yourself. It just gives you the search bar, basically, and positions your stuff. On tvOS, it looks like this. Normally it's in black because it's on a TV, but it's in white here. You get this 1D keyboard, but the thing that's most useful that you would never be able to re-implement in JavaScript, no matter how hard you tried, is holding the Siri button on the remote and searching with your voice, which is by far the easiest way to type in tvOS. So we're going to want to use this native component. So what does a UISearchController need? It needs a search results controller, which is just another UI view controller. We get lots of UI view controllers. And so this is where it's going to display its search results. So this is where we're going to put our React search results. We're going to kind of stuff them in here. And then it needs a search results updater object, which is something which conforms to the UI search results updating protocol, which basically just means it needs to implement some method, and it'll get this callback when someone types in the search bar. Not like that, like that. Right. So here's basically where we're at. If you imagine that I've put search results inside that search component. What we need to do next is we need to make a UISearchController. So here's React on this side, here's native over on that side. We need to make a UISearchController. Then we're going to make a search results view controller, which that thing from the previous slide, which we're going to call NK search results view controller. Then the magic we're going to do is we're going to take our search results out of React. We're then going to stuff them inside this native controller. Right? Then, unfortunately, to use a UISearchController in a TabBar controller, we need to wrap it in another thing. This is a thing called a UISearchContainerController. Yeah, I know. And then, this is kind of two bits of swapping that we're about to do. We're going to yank that search results out, and then we're going to swap our UISearchContainerController and this search component that React is sort of managing right now, sort of like that. We're going to swap one in, out for the other. It took a bit of figuring out to figure out how and when to do this stuff, but it does work, and hopefully it's going to work for us today. Let's find out. So first things first, we're going to make our search results view controller, which is going to wrap our search results. Did I make one of them earlier? Yeah, I did. Sweet. Let's hide all of these stupid things. Make that one over there. Make that a bit smaller. Let's take our NK search results controller and drag this over here. So there's not much in it right now. Well, that's a lie, there is. So this is our thing, which is going to hold our sort of component that we're going to rip out of React. It's a UI view controller. It has an initializer, like we were looking at before. It takes as a parameter this view controller, then it's going to set it on this property, so it sort of holds onto it and it doesn't die. What does that method look like? Hopefully this. Hooray, it does. Initializers are pretty ugly in Objective-C, I'll give you that. So here we're implementing it. We do if self equals super init, which is just calling the superclasses initializer. And we're going to hold on to that React component that we've kind of stolen. Then we're going to need to add that to this thing's view. Unfortunately, UI view controllers, their view isn't ready at an initialization time here. So we need to listen to this callback called viewDidLoad, comme ça. So when our view is ready, this viewDidLoad will get called. So when that happens, we're then going to take our React controller's view, and we're going to add it as a subview of our view. So we're just taking the thing that we get passed, adding it to our view at the appropriate time. What is that? Cool. Now, let's get into the meat of the trickery. So, we're going to get rid of this layout subviews because we actually don't want everything to be red because that's weird. First things first, we're going to just do some imports of some sort of we're going to import our search results view controller, which we're going to use. And then there's these gnarly bits of React that we're about to use. And one more thing we need to, did I put that in anything? Cool. Our search container view controller, which is that very outer layer. We're going to need to set that as a property on our search component so that it doesn't go out of memory and go away. And the weird trick is there's this method called ReactBridge.didFinish that we need to listen for. Of course, I hear you cry. This one? Yeah. So this React bridge did finish transaction is something that gets called by React somewhere in the gnarly internals of when it's laying stuff out. It gets called all the time though. So we only want to do this like weird swap once. So we check to see if we have a container view controller, and if we already do, then we return and we don't do anything. So the first thing we do is we look at our components. So we're in our NK search components, that red thing in the diagram there. We look at its React subviews, which is just going to be the React children that you have, like normally this.props.children. We're just going to be lazy and just grab the first object for now. We're just doing first object for now, and then we get the UI view controller that corresponds to that React component. This is where we're going to put our React search results. Then we're just going to inject that into our search results view controller that we just made. So this is where we're sort of stealing those search results out. This one. Then we're going to do the all-important wrapping in the UISearchController, which is the thing that gives us the keyboard. And we're going to set its search results controller to be our search results view controller, which wraps our React search results. It's boxes and boxes. What number was it? Probably 8, I think. Then we're going to make our final sort of wrapper container controller. We just put our search controller inside that. We pass it in the initializer. Then one thing we're going to do is we're going to take by our I mean the search components TabBar item, which is going to get set on it by React. This is that thing I briefly mentioned earlier that gives you the title and the icon and all of that. I'm going to take that TabBar item and set it on the search container. Because this search container is what's going to get set as the root of the TabBar, which we're going to do with a little swappery here. So first things first, I realize there's quite a lot here. First things first, we need to find a reference to our TabBar controller, which we can do by getting self.reactViewController.TabBar controller. All UI view controllers in iOS can get a reference to their parent TabBar if they keep asking for it. Then we're going to get an array of the TabBar's view controllers. We're going to make a mutable copy of them. So in iOS, these arrays are normally immutable. We make a mutable copy because we want to change the array. Then we need to find out the index of what our component here is in that array. So we do index of object sort of self. And then we replace that object with our brand new UI search container view controller. And then we reassign the TabBar controllers to be this new array that we've just made. And in theory, this should all work. But just to make it more fun, I'm going to actually put in, so in our, where's our search component? So navigation, our TabBar. Right now our search doesn't have anything in it. In here, I'm just going to put in another video grid component. So it's going to display the same as the home for now. Like that. What's it complaining about? Oh, that needs to be like that, doesn't it? Hey. And hopefully, oh no, we're going to need to recompile. Didn't listen to my earlier advice. To recompile our app. What? No message provided. Did the package break some shit? God damn it. I thought it was going to go so well. Need to save? Did I not save that? Oh my God, please tell me it's that. Yes. Sweet. Is it going to work, though? That's the question. So we've got our home that works the same as before. And if we navigate over to our search component, whoa! We have our UISearchController's native keyboard. And we have our search results that we're not actually doing any searching on yet. So this is rendered by React. This is rendered by native. Unfortunately, there's one more gotcha. You can't actually, it's really hard to see that. The keyboard doesn't work right now, which is a slight problem. There's one more little hack that we have to do. So it turns out that in React's implementation on tvOS, in iOS, when you want to listen for different touches on different things, you use a thing called a gesture recognizer. And this sets a gesture recognizer for the select button, which breaks this keyboard. But we can fix it ourselves, like this. It's pretty gross. We need to go through our root views, windows, find out all the gesture recognizers on it, get the allowed press types. If it's select and it's a tap gesture recognizer, remove the gesture recognizer. Then and only then does our keyboard work, which I think is fine. I think it's fine. Cool. Oh, there's some warning down there. It's probably fine. Now, Ray, it's typing in our search bar. Woo! And then finally, I only just got this working just in the car on the way here. But we're going to try and do it anyway. We're going to try and actually get that search to actually filter our search results. Otherwise, it's not a particularly good search tab, is it? How are we going to do that? What are the next steps? So one thing we need to do on our search, so to do this communication between native and JS, we need to do these we need to define little sort of functions on them. On our search, whoa! On our search component, please tell me this is, oh, that's what I'll do. If I get this up here. Yes, that makes my life so much easier. Cool. Oh no. Yeah, where's my mouse? Where the hell is my mouse? There we are. Right, so we need this little callback that we're going to call in here for when our text updates, and this is our way of communicating from native back out to the JS. It's an RCT bubbling event block, of course, called onChangeText. Then we need to, in our little manager class, which one is that one? That one? Yeah, we need to do another weird little export here. So this is what exposes this property to the JavaScript using some magic of macros. In our search component, so, I was talking about earlier, we need that search results updater thing to listen for changes on our UISearchController. We're going to set that to be ourselves, .search results updater. So this is what is going to let us know when someone types in the search bar. And then Xcode is hopefully going to complain. No, maybe. And then all that means is we need to implement this one method called update search results for search controller. Oh, what do you mean? All right, maybe I'll figure it out. Update search results for search controller. Maybe we haven't imported the right thing. What?
Yeah, you're declaring it, but you're still inside the
Whoa! It's really hard to see at an angle. That's a very good point. Thank you. All right, let's get outside of this method. This absolute monster of a method. We put it out here. So when our search controller's text changes, first we check whether this property's been set, and then we do it by just passing little objects back and forth over the bridge like this. With text, with the input of our search controller's text bar. And then in our, where are we going to do this? Where did I plan to do this? In navigation? Maybe? Video grid. Yeah, okay, let's just do it. Okay, we're going to do it in navigation. Are we? Yeah, all right. This thing is just going to have, it's probably not where the state should live, but it's where it's going to live for now. It's going to have some search text, which is going to be empty to start with. And then on our search components, this is our native component, we are going to want to assign that. Oh, that's not what I meant to do. I meant to put it out here. This is a function which is going to update our search text to this native, so where we send our event here, we send text thing, that gets exposed as event.native event.text. We're going to set that here, so like on change text equals this dot on change text. Probably, oh, that. And finally, I think I set up earlier, did I set this thing to have props? Yeah, we pass in, we're going to pass that in as props to our video grid here. And I haven't tested this, but it might work. We'll find out. Search text equals this dot state dot search text. All right, let's recompile and cross our fingers. There's our regular home page. There's our search page, which is just showing everything because our search text is empty. Then if we type stuff, we're not, we need to be lowercase, don't we? How can we do? I wonder if I can just, yeah, I can just type in here so I don't need to actually use the thing. Look. Way! That's a talk that I gave as well. So let's quickly recap. Where are we? I said hi. We built a grid view purely in React Native on tvOS. It's mostly the same as regular native. We then talked about different ways to use different components. And we used this TabBar iOS component, which wraps UI TabBar controller, and we made tabs at the top. We then added a native search tab using UISearchController and a bunch of wrapping different things in different things. And then I'm going to say bye. I'll put the slides online later. Thanks very much.